Okay, we're going to finish up on Antony and Cleopatra today and on Rome and move on to England next week in Henry V. But to sum up what we've been looking at in Antony and Cleopatra, let me go back to Coriolanus and the conversation among the Volsces at the end of Act 4, Scene 5, and their discussion of war and peace, because it really could have clued us in to what happens in Antony and Cleopatra. They're excited that they're going to war again. Why, then we shall have a stirring world again. This peace is nothing but to rust iron, increase tailors, and breed ballad makers. See, they know there's going to be more poetry in a peaceful empire. Let me have war, say I. It exceeds peace as far as day does night. It's sprightly walking, audible, and full of vent. Peace is a very apoplexy, lethargy, dull, deaf, sleepy. Notice how sleepy the characters are in Antony and Cleopatra. They're so indolent, they're bored, insensible. Get rid of more bastard children than war's a destroyer of men. Certainly true of Antony and Cleopatra's world. 'Tis so, and as wars of some sort may be said to be a ravisher, so it cannot be denied, but peace is a great maker of cuckolds. Again, a lot of adultery going on in the world of Antony and Cleopatra. Aye, and peace makes men hate one another. Reason, because they then less need one another. And this is one of the great Machiavellian teachings of the plays as a whole, that war energizes the population, peace produces indolence, peace makes people go soft. Therefore, it's ominous for Rome in Antony and Cleopatra when we hear the last of many battles I mean to fight, or the time of universal peace is near. There's a suggestion in Coriolanus, and this is one of Machiavelli's ideas, that the Roman Republic was energized by all these enemies it fought, and in particular that the patricians pursued a policy of getting the plebeians behind the regime by threatening them with the prospect of foreign enemies. And now when we see the Parthians being defeated, in the terms of the play and almost in historical terms, it means that the last of the Roman enemies is going, that we won't have anyone to fight anymore. And that's ominous in the terms of the play itself. Enobarbus, this is on page 34, is pointing out to the triumvirs. This is Act 2, Scene 2, about line 109. You shall have time to wrangle in when you have nothing else to do. In other words, they've got to unite themselves because they've got an enemy, Pompey, right now. But the ominous note in this speech is we're coming to a point when they'll have nothing else to do, where there will be no more enemies, and therefore whatever alliances they have will fall apart. Pompey himself understands this back on page 29, so Act 2, Scene 2, again, 29, about line 40. I know not mean this, how lesser enmities may give way to greater, were it not that we stand up against them all, 'twere pregnant they should square between themselves. So again, the notion that what's keeping the triumvirs together here is a common enemy, Pompey. And indeed, throughout these plays, we see it's only a common enemy that helps generate a sense of the common good. And what happens, therefore, under the empire, as it starts to make a whole out of the world, as the Romans understand it, is that sense of a common good disappears, and everything now devolves upon personal and private loyalties. This is what Antony says to his troops on page 109. This is Act 4, Scene 8. So about line 5 in Act 4, Scene 8, page 109. I thank you all, for doughty-handed are you, and have fought not as you served the cause, but as it had been each man's like mine. That's really very un-Roman in the Republican sense of Roman. The Roman soldiers were supposed to fight for the Republic, to fight for the cause. That was Brutus's principle. Not that I love Caesar less, but that I love Rome more. But here is that transformation we saw in Brutus at the end of Julius Caesar. What really matters is that my men have been loyal to me. And that's the idea. As if it wasn't a national cause, the Roman cause, but each man's like mine. And we saw the consequences of this in comparing Octavia's situation with Volumnia. Volumnia had a dilemma. My son, Rome. My son, Rome. Well, she was able to resolve that dilemma because no son of hers could be more important than Rome. Her sons had to serve the cause of Rome. When Octavia has the dilemma, it's my husband, my brother, my husband, my brother. And they're on the same plane. And as we saw, that's a much more difficult level to resolve. What we see in the empire now is this enormous explosion of personal loyalties, or you can say that personal loyalties are all that's left. And the problem with that is you don't know which to choose. Again and again in this play, we find people with the dilemma of loyalty. Minos doesn't know, do I serve Pompey or should I go over to the triumvirs? Enobarbus is, of course, the greatest example of this. Do I serve Antony or do I go over to Octavius Caesar? And these dilemmas are presented as much more difficult to resolve than the situation in the Republic where when it was working, people would put the good of Rome over their own. We were talking last time about how this works out in terms of love in the play. That Antony and Cleopatra seek out some new kind of infinite love. Love in the Republic was finite, because like everything else, it was bounded by the city. The city set limits on love. Marriage was supposed to be for the sake of Rome and part of it. What that does is cool down marriage. In a way, it makes it too rational. One way you could talk about Antony and Cleopatra is they want a really irrational love. That's the only way to produce an infinite love. When you look at the love, such as it is, between Antony and Octavia, it's poisoned by the fact that it's a dynastic marriage. Antony has too many reasons for loving Octavia for her to believe that he really loves her, which is actually a good suspicion on her part. When love is that integrated into the city or the community, when it's serving that clear political purpose, it doesn't quite look like love to us. Shakespeare had explored this form years earlier in Romeo and Juliet, where the point was to fall in love between two warring families so you could have the thrill of defying your parents. And Shakespeare shows that quite clearly in Romeo and Juliet, that the passion of love is generated by the very sense of danger involved. And that's clearly true of Antony and Cleopatra. It's almost as if once Fulvia dies, Antony's got to get married quickly so he can start committing adultery again. Because that's what Cleopatra wants. She wants a guy that will violate proprieties for her, who will show how much he loves her by the fact that he's willing to break the rules for her. And more deeply, as I started to say last time, these lovers want to make sacrifices for each other. That's the only, if it be love indeed, tell me how much. Well, that's how you tell them how much, by sacrificing for something. And so the point about this love between Antony and Cleopatra is how irrational it is. Therefore, it proves its depth. Antony has every reason to desert Cleopatra. Therefore, if he stays loyal to her, it's because he loves her and not for any prudential consideration. And the same thing on the other side. Now, this is a very intense love, but also radically insecure for just this reason. It's so irrational. Now, this idea also comes up in the case of soldiers following their lords. And we see it in the case of Enobarbus. This would be on page 91. So Act 3, Scene 13, about line 42. Mine honesty and I begin to square. The loyalty well held to fools does make our faith mere folly. Yet he that can endure to follow with allegiance a fallen lord does conquer him that did his master conquer and earns a place in the story. This is the logic of losing we've been seeing ever since Brutus. This is actually the follower's side of Brutus's logic as a leader. Here what Enobarbus realizes that there's something irrational about his behavior. The loyalty well held to fools does make our faith mere folly. Antony's behaving irrationally. He's going to lose everything. If I continue to follow him, it's an irrational decision. Yet, he that can endure to follow with allegiance a fallen Lord does conquer him that did his master conquer and earns a place in the story. The logic is the same logic as that of the love of Antony and Cleopatra. The idea here is if you follow a victorious leader, maybe you're just doing it for the victory. There's a reason to follow a victorious leader. You're going to benefit from it. If you want to show pure loyalty, true loyalty, you can show it much better following a loser. Because then you can say you're acting out of pure loyalty and not in any way mercenary. That's the logic of why he continues to follow Antony here. And so we therefore get one of the typical paradoxes in the play, that losing is winning. That way you conquer him that did your master conquer, and are a place in the story. Your Lord may lose, but you win because you've shown you're a true loyal follower by showing that you will follow someone even in defeat. So we've been seeing a lot now of this logic of loss. Remember Ventidius, ambition, the soldier's virtue, rather makes choice of loss than gain, which darkens him. Now, where have we seen this logic before? It was on day one of this course. And I take you back to Niccolo Machiavelli and the discourses. And I'll read you again a passage that I hope will have more resonance for you now. It's the one on page 131. Book 2, chapter 2, thinking then whence it can arise that those in ancient times, that in those ancient times, peoples were more lovers of freedom than in these, by which he means they were active citizens. I believe it arises from the same cause that makes men less strong now, which I believe is the difference between our education and the ancient, founded on the difference between our religion and the ancient. For our religion, Christianity, having shown the truth in the true way, makes us esteem less the honor of the world, whereas the Gentiles, the Romans, the pagans, esteeming it very much, it is held in honor as the highest virtue, and having placed the highest good in it, were more ferocious in their actions. The ancient religion did not beatify men if they were not full of worldly glory, as were captains of armies and princes of republics. Our religion, Christianity, has glorified humble and contemplative more than active men. It has then placed the highest good in humility, abjectness, and contempt of things human. The other, the Romans, placed it in greatness of spirit, strength of body, and all other things capable of making men very strong. And if our religion asks that you have strength in yourself, it wishes you to be capable more of suffering than of doing something strong. This mode of life thus seems to have rendered the world weak and given it in prey to criminal men who can manage it securely, seeing that the collectivity of men so as to go to paradise think more of enduring their beatings than of avenging them. It's an extraordinary passage. And I think provides a great clue to Antony and Cleopatra. That is what we've been seeing a lot here, is in this play, people are emphasizing their willingness to endure their beatings rather to avenge them. All this logic of loss in the play. So I want to offer the suggestion that Antony and Cleopatra is Shakespeare's covert analysis of the rise of Christianity. That what he is showing in the end of the Roman Republic and the emergence of empire are the conditions that also led to the rise of Christianity. Now, there's something initially preposterous about this claim in the sense that for centuries the Roman Empire was the great enemy of Christianity. We know about centuries of persecution. Certainly the Christians hated the Roman Empire and invaded against it. And yet, ultimately, the Roman Empire ended up Christian. And really only 3 centuries or so after this play, around 325, the Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity. Charmian had hoped to marry Octavius Caesar, but she got to marry Constantine instead. In a way, what Emperor Constantine figured out was that Christianity was the appropriate religion for a worldwide empire. and that it's getting people willing to endure their sufferings was really quite an ideal religion for an emperor who wanted to rule them. So let me try to work this out for you and begin by showing you that Shakespeare makes us aware that these events are contemporaneous with the rise of Christianity. It's one of the stranger aspects of play. The most obvious example of what I'm talking about is the continuing mention of Herod of Jewry in the play, which reminds us that Octavius Caesar, as Augustus Caesar, was the Roman emperor at the time that Jesus was born. There are 5 mentions of Herod in the play. I should say that he is mentioned frequently in Plutarch's Life of Mark Antony, so Shakespeare was not pulling this out of his hat. There's only one case where Plutarch mentions a different king of the Jews, and Shakespeare substitutes Herod. But still, when you add up the references, they keep reminding us that the chronology of this play can roughly be mapped onto Christian chronology. I'll remind you, these events, Battle of Actium is 31 BC. Obviously, Jesus was not yet born in 31 BC, but Octavius becoming Augustus Caesar would be the link here. And look at that first reference to Herod, which is the one that's least based in Plutarch. It's on page 7. So Act 1, Scene 2, about line 25, where Charmian is asking the soothsayer for fortune and says, "Good now, some excellent fortune. Let me be married to 3 kings in a forenoon." Now, if you know the story of Jesus' nativity, 3 kings, the 3 magi are involved in that. "And let me have a child at 50, a miraculous birth, to whom Herod of Jewry may do homage." We know Herod's attempt to destroy the infant Jesus, so this would be something that would go beyond Jesus, even the miraculous child that Herod would worship. "And may do homage, find me to marry with Octavius Caesar." That is very strange when you think about it. This prediction that someday this religious force out of the East will somehow marry with Caesar. And indeed, that happened in the 4th century AD when, as I said, Constantine converted the empire to Christianity. Here's a couple of other peculiar references in the play that scholars have discovered over the years. This is page 94, Act 3, Scene 13, about line 126, where Antony says, "Oh, that were I upon the hill of Basan to outroar the horned herd." Now, this comes absolutely out of nowhere. As your notes point out, it's a quotation of Psalm 22, which seems odd for a Roman to be doing. I took the trouble to look up Psalm 22, and its opening line is, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" I see some of you are catching the reference. Jesus says that on the cross, as we well know, say from Bach's St. Matthew Passion. So it's rather strange that Antony quotes one psalm, and it happens to be the psalm that Jesus quotes on the cross. A couple of other examples. There are a lot of buried references to the New Testament in this work. A scholar named Ethel Seton discovered this said years ago. There are quotations from the book of Revelation in Antony and Cleopatra, page 121. The scene, very eerie scene, with Antony trying to kill himself. And so it's Act 4, Scene 14, about line 106. The second guard says, "The star is fallen," and the first guard says, "And time is at its period." Now, this scholar, Ethel Seton, traced these to the book of Revelation, chapter 8, verses 10 to 11, "And there fell a great star from heaven," repeated in chapter 9, verse 1, and chapter 10, again, this is the last book of the New Testament, chapter 10, line 6, "Time shall be no more." Time is at its period, time shall be no more, the star has fallen, and there fell a great star from heaven. Not provable in court, perhaps, but pretty interesting echoes. And she goes on to show many other echoes of the book of Revelation in the work. So what I'm getting at then is that Shakespeare reads the fall of the Republic and the beginning of the empire against the process that Machiavelli sees where Christianity subverts the values, overturns the values of the Roman Republic. And there are just a lot of passages to this effect where all the terms of Rome get redefined. Let's look, for example, at the term noble. If you look at page 47, this is Act 2, Scene 5, about line 82. Here's the traditional notion of nobility. When Cleopatra is upset with herself for striking a mere servant, she said, these hands do lack nobility, that they strike a meaner than myself. She's a queen, she's an aristocrat, servants, messengers as a servant. She shouldn't even touch him, let alone strike him. These hands do lack nobility, that they strike a meaner than myself. That's the traditional notion of the distinction between noble and base and noble and mean. But the word noble undergoes interesting transformations in the play. If you look at page 126, for example, so this is Act 4, Scene 15, about line 82. My noble girls. Now that's what we know in poetry as an oxymoron, where the adjective contradicts the noun. Noble kings, noble queens, noble girls. Doesn't seem to quite work. And then the most striking example of this is at the end of the play, several of them, in fact. Look at page 141. This is Act 5, Scene 2, about line 226. When Cleopatra thinking of the way she's going to commit suicide and what poor an instrument may do a noble deed, he brings me liberty. You really see the Roman terms getting redefined there. This is a fig seller. He's a poor instrument. The asp is a poor instrument. And yet it may do a noble deed. He brings me liberty. In this country, we say, give me liberty or give me death. Not death is liberty. The Roman liberty was not thought of as death. And so here she's redefining that term. And then finally, the most striking example is on page 146. So Act 5, Scene 2, about line 343. Caesar walks in and says, "O noble weakness." There's the oxymoron to end all oxymorons. If you can focus on the paradox of that phrase, you see the transformation that's happening in this play, that weakness has been redefined as nobility. Now, some of you may already have been thinking of Friedrich Nietzsche at this point, and I'm trying to bring in all sorts of political philosophy to the course, giving you some Machiavelli, some Plato, some Aristotle, a little bit of Nietzsche so far. Let's give you a little more now. That is, I'm going to offer Nietzsche's understanding of the difference between paganism and Christianity as a model for what Shakespeare does in this play. Now, these are ideas that Nietzsche mainly develops in a book of his called The Genealogy of Morals. In the second essay, you can also find it a bit in Beyond Good and Evil. Second essay of Genealogy of Morals is called Good versus Bad versus Good versus Evil. That is, Nietzsche works this theory out in terms of two sets of terms, good and bad, and good and evil. And this is what Nietzsche calls master morality. You'll see these terms apply to the Roman plays in a minute. And this is what he calls slave morality. Okay, let's explain this. Good versus bad is the vocabulary of an aristocratic morality, of a kind of world like the Roman Republic, of the world of Coriolanus. That is, it's the world of aristocratic warriors, and for them what is good are the virtues of aristocratic warriors. Is that a question? Oh, okay. So what is good is strength. It's whatever gives you victory in battle. We see that, the whole ethos of strength in Coriolanus. On fair ground, I could beat 40 of them. The great warriors are courageous. They are well-disciplined. They're in great shape. They're physically strong. They're mentally strong. They win battles. And that's what you think of as good. How does Conan the Barbarian put it? What is good is to destroy your enemies and to hear the lamentation of their women. That's bad Arnold Schwarzenegger there for you, but that's mass morality. Bad, then, is everything that's the opposite of that. It's weakness. It's everything that corresponds to the poor people that end up as slaves in one of these aristocratic societies. They're weak. They're physically weak. They're cowardly. They're not good soldiers and so on. So when you look at this kind of world, you see it all over the ancient world. You see it in Homer, for example. The portrayals in the Iliad is a great example of what mass morality was. Nietzsche was a classical scholar, and in Homer there are almost two orders of human beings. There are the heroes and then the ordinary people. The principle in Homer is the Greek shall inherit the earth. As we know in Christianity, the principle is the meek shall inherit the earth. And that's the transformation Nietzsche has in mind. He calls it the slave revolt morality, the revaluation of values. What happens in slave morality, which is how he characterizes Christianity, is these values are inverted. That under Christianity, what was thought of as good among the ancient masters is now reinterpreted as evil. So, for example, all that wonderful battle-winning quality, that's now seen as aggressiveness and nastiness, and that's what makes someone evil. Pride now becomes a sin. Pride is a virtue in Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. In Christianity, it becomes the greatest of all evils. The mastery of the masters is reinterpreted as something evil in their nature, and what was thought of as bad now gets reinterpreted as good. Humility. Humility now becomes the principal virtue. You make a virtue out of your weakness. Nietzsche says you make a virtue out of necessity. So that things that the noble masters had contempt for are now prized in Christianity. Submissiveness. Turn the other cheek. Again, the meek shall inherit the earth. This is how we get from the Greek shall inherit the earth to the meek shall inherit the earth. Anyway, I just give you a very quick outline of this. So you'll see it is the logic of Antony and Cleopatra. But let me just pause here. Any questions about this? Yes?
Because, we're talking about how, in ancient Greece, pride should are a virtue, but it seems to me in Greek tragedy, pride is a downfall.
No, actually, I'll talk to you in private about that. Hubris does not mean pride in ancient Greek. The Greek word for pride is megalosoukia, and it's a virtue. Hubris is insolence or outrage. It's a very, I have to tell you, that word is constantly mistaught in high schools, and so it'd be a long story. I really can't go into it. I'd be happy to talk to you after class about that. It'd be a whole other lecture. I'd have to go through and show you what that means. Look up hubris in a Greek dictionary, and you won't see the word pride there. Anyway, again, it's not, I'll just say quickly, it's not that the Greeks didn't think there might be some problem with this, but read Homer, read the Iliad, and see if you see what's celebrated there. Anyway, the whole hubris thing, it's another whole story. Don't have time to go into that here. Yes? Yeah.
From Rome, the imperial mass morality to Christian
Yeah.
slave morality.
Yeah.
Do you understand that all three simply
No. That's what I'm going to, the whole lecture is going to be about that. That's what we're doing here today. Okay, I'm just sorry to be batting off the questions, but they're really taking me too far afield here. Oh, okay, let me try to work this out then. That is, in fact, I've jumped ahead to Nietzsche here, and obviously Shakespeare did not read Nietzsche. But you can see a lot of this is in Machiavelli already, when he's talking about how the ancients prize greatness of soul and the Christians prize suffering. I found this passage in Rabelais, the French writer of the 16th century, in his Gargantua and Pantagruel, which comes even closer to Nietzsche than Machiavelli does. In Book 1, he says, such imitations of the ancient heroes, Hercules, Alexander, Hannibal, Scipio, Caesar, and so on, is contrary to the teachings of our gospel. And what the Saracens and barbarians once dubbed prowess, we now call brigandage and evildoing. There's Nietzsche's formula right there. What the Saracens and barbarians once dubbed prowess, we now call brigandage and evildoing. That's exactly this formulation of Nietzsche that was thought good in the ancient world gets redefined as evil in the modern world. And this then does work out again and again in the play. All these paradoxes we've been looking at, particularly the notion that losing is victory. But you see it, for example, in the paradoxes involving death and life in the play. They're constantly being redefined in terms of each other. You look at page 24, Act 1, Scene 5, line 34. Cleopatra's talking of how men react to her. Die with looking on as life. So there's life that turns into death, but elsewhere in the play we see death turn into life. Page 99, Act 4, Scene 2. This is Act 4, Scene 2, about line 5. Antony says, by sea and land I'll fight or I will live, or bathe my dying honor in the blood, shall make it live again. Page 120, about line, this is Act 4, Scene 14, about line 78. For with a wound I must be cured. That paradox. A wound is a cure. The very next page, after the quotations from the book of Revelation, so page 121, Act 4, Scene 14, line 108, let him that loves me strike me dead. Or Cleopatra's line we've already looked at, page 131, Act 5, Scene 2, line 1, my desolation does begin to make a better life. 'Tis paltry to be Caesar. Now, I talked about that as sour grapes when I first read you those lines. And indeed, the logic of this Nietzschean position is a kind of sour grapes mentality. It's how losers make themselves out to seem winners. So in particular, what Nietzsche examines is the psychological disposition. I lost this kingship, but it really wasn't good anyway, and I didn't want it. And in fact, I really wanted to lose it. That's the logic we see in Cleopatra. This is making a virtue out of necessity, that you no longer can conquer, so you claim that conquering is vile conquest, as Brutus did, and say, I shall have more glory of this losing day. And that's the logic we see working out in all these characters. That they're trying to present themselves as better off for having lost. And that's when they develop these arguments, 'tis paltry to be Caesar, as Cleopatra continues in that same speech, which is page 132, Act 5, Scene 2, about line 8. Never palates more the dung, the beggar's nurse and Caesar's. This is a play that begins with a world of hierarchy, with a very clear distinction between noble and base, as we see in Coriolanus, and now Cleopatra's undermining that. There's no difference between Caesar and a beggar's nurse. So 'tis paltry to be Caesar. And why should I worry I've lost my queenship when in fact now I'm going to be better off spiritually? There's a very interesting echo between Coriolanus and Antony and Cleopatra that points to just this idea. And especially this idea of sour grapes. Look at sour grapes, which is the logic of a eunuch. Look at page 43. This is Act 2, Scene 5. When Charmian says, "My arm is sore, best play with Mardian." And Cleopatra says, this is again Act 2, Scene 5, line 5, "As well a woman with an eunuch played as with a woman. Come, you'll play with me, sir, as well as I can, madam. And when goodwill is showed, though it come too short, the actor may plead pardon." Now, this is what you can call a morality of intentions. And another way of understanding this distinction between what Nietzsche somewhat prejudicially calls master morality and slave morality is slave morality is a morality of intentions, and master morality is a morality of deeds. That is what Cleopatra says here is, again, a morality of weakness. And when goodwill is showed, though it come too short, the actor may plead pardon. Saying, doesn't matter how things turn out, all that matters is you had good intentions. Now, this is the very opposite of Coriolanus' idea of morality. You can go look this up in Coriolanus. It's page 32, which means it's Act 1, Scene 9, about line 18. When he's addressing Comitius and the troops, he says, "He that has but affected his goodwill hath o'ertaken mine act." He that has affected his goodwill, not he that has a goodwill is as good as me. But if you've translated your goodwill into action, okay, you're in business for me. Very interestingly, one of the plebeians, one of the tribunes, in fact, gives the morality of intentions. You can look this up. It's page 125 in the Signet edition, so Act 5, Scene 1, about line 45. When Menidius is worried that he'll go ask Coriolanus to give up his intentions on destroying Rome, Cecilia says, basically, go anyway, yet your goodwill must have that thanks from Rome after the measure as you intended well. Again, the word goodwill here echoes among these three passages in the two plays, and it does seem to be an effort to contrast what I'm calling a morality of deeds with the morality of intentions. Very characteristic of the masters that they're in power, they have power, they win battles, and so basically they say, put up or shut up. Don't tell me what might have been. You either win or you don't. But it's very characteristic of this new morality that emerges in the world of Antony and Cleopatra, that people want to put the emphasis, I really meant well. And you see how many, in a way it's the effect of Brutus's end as well. So we're looking at the emergence in the play of a new understanding of morality that at least corresponds to the sort of thing both Machiavelli and Nietzsche are talking about in connection with the rise of Christianity. For one thing, what we do see in the play, and this is what seems to have influenced Constantine 3 centuries later, is the notion that this universal empire is going to need a universal religion. Up till now, we've been talking about civic religions, religions bound to a particular community. There's an interesting pattern in the play of people demanding more. Page 19, for example, where this is the end of Act 1, Scene 4, about line 100, and all the gods go with you. Now, people are still invoking individual gods in the play, but there's this suggestion maybe all the gods. Page 82, again, a a summing up of gods. This is Act 3, Scene 10. Scaris says, this is about line 5 in Act 3, Scene 10. Gods and goddesses, all the whole synod of them. It's interesting, we use that word synod of a group of bishops today. And there is a suggestion here of some kind of more total religion. And maybe Antony's the answer. Page 120. What Eros says to him, this is Act 4, Scene 14, about line 85. Turn from me then that noble countenance wherein the worship of the whole world lies. It's a notion that there might be a God who would be worshipped by the whole world. Now remember, this is a new idea in the Roman world, where you had these gods specific to the city, and you encountered gods from other cities. It was, in fact, problematic for the Romans when they first encountered the Hebrews in the ancient world, these people who had one God and who thought that was the universal God. The Romans were quite tolerant of other religions because they just made religion additive. They let people add their gods to the Roman gods. But the problem with the Jews in the ancient world was they had one God and rejected the Roman gods, similarly with the Christians. But maybe there's some hope in a universal God, and we see that in Cleopatra's dream of Antony. This is on page 135, about Act 5, Scene 2, about line 80. Here we see the imaging of a cosmic God now. His face was as the heavens, and therein stuck a sun and moon, which kept their course and lighted the little of the earth. Now here I must point out where your edition is wrong, and every other edition is wrong, and I'm right, and Shakespeare's right. That is, you're probably not aware of how edited Shakespeare's plays are. That is, the text you have is always, to some extent, a reconstruction of editors going back to whatever originals we have, chiefly the first folios and these so-called quartos. And they do make changes and never tell you about it. If you'll turn to page 152, if you got it, the signet, look at the very last entry there on page 152 under Act 5, Scene 2, and then go over to 81, and it says, little o, the earth. That's what I have in my edition. Little of the earth is what's in the folio. Now again, I'm trying to prove it to you there. If you look at the first folio, the only text we have of Antony and Cleopatra, what it says here is, and lighted the little of the earth. Lighted the little people of the earth. Now, I don't know, some 18th century editor, I think it was Tybalt, thought there was something wrong with that line and changed it to the absolutely preposterous, the little o, the earth. Which then they have to footnote and tell you that it's, the image of the globe, the little o. I mean, this is the worst imitation I've ever seen in Shakespeare, because Shakespeare was making a point here. There's this giant cosmic Antony, and he becomes the god of the little of the earth. Again, that's something very much in the spirit of Christianity, not the little o, the earth. And again, it's just everyone accepts this emendation, even though it made perfect sense as it was. This is obviously an echo of Cassius's claim about Julius Caesar, which you can find on page 11 of Julius Caesar. The famous Act 1, Scene 2, line 135. Why, man, he doth bestride the narrow world like a colossus, and we petty men walk under his huge legs and peep about to find ourselves dishonorable grave. That is an image of a giant colossus and little men walking underneath them. The editors actually take away the power of that passage by changing it to the little of the earth, but I've now corrected it for you. And indeed, notice that this is a greater giant than Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar, in a way, spans the two parties of Rome. That's what makes him a colossus. He stands above the patricians and the plebeians. Here is a true colossus, a Mediterranean colossus. His legs bestrid the ocean. His reared arms crested the world. His voice was propertied as all the tuned spheres. So this does seem to be an effort on Cleopatra's part to create the image of an Antony. Indeed, there are several points in the play where she's trying to turn the word Antony into a bigger word than Caesar. Caesar managed to get his name turned into a title. She keeps talking about an Antony, as if there could be some new higher title. And indeed, this is the hope here, that somehow we've got a universal empire now. We need a universal God to preside over it. He will preside over the little of the earth, and he'll offer himself as an object of worship because of his sacrifice for people. Now, this takes me to page 100. And the weirdest passage, in a way, in the play. This is Act 4, Scene 2, about line 15. This is Antony's, if you'll pardon the expression, last supper before the battle with his soldiers. Starting at line 15, and thou art honest too. I wish I could be made so many men, and all of you clapped up together in an Antony. Again, this is the name of a new god here, is what they're trying to get going here. That I might do you service so good as you have done. Here's another inversion. The master becomes the servant. This will be the new master whose mastery comes from offering himself as a servant. That I might do, and the gods forbid. Well, my good fellows, wait on me tonight, scant not my cups, and make as much of me as when my empire was your fellow too and suffered my command. And Cleopatra asks, what does he mean? And Enid says, to make his followers weep. And this is a new kind of god now. The gods in Homer and the gods in Coriolanus laugh. They're master gods. They're so superior to human beings, they laugh at human beings. But Antony is a man of sorrows. He is a man who can make his followers weep. Tend me tonight. If you know the scene in the Garden of Olives, Gethsemane in the New Testament, this has lots of echoes of that. Maybe it is the period of your duty. And time is at its period. Haply you shall not see me more, or if a mangled shadow. What is this a way for a Roman commander to speak on the eve of a battle? Can you picture Coriolanus giving this speech? Guys, we're going out tomorrow to lose, and I'm going to die. Yay, go with me. Perhaps tomorrow you'll serve another master. I look on you as one that takes his leave. Mine honest friends, I turn you not away, but like a master married to your good service, stay till death. Tend me tonight 2 hours, I ask no more, and the gods yield you for it. What? And Enid says, what mean you, sir, to give them this discomfort? Look, they weep, and I, an ass, am onion-eyed for shame. Transform us not to women. And again, throughout this play, the Egyptianizing of Rome has been imaged as an effeminizing of Rome, and here Antony's bringing about the process himself by offering himself as a mangled shadow, as the master who will serve his servants. Now, it's very, if you look at the logic of Enobarbus in the play, he ends up playing a Judas-like role. He betrays Antony and then sees himself as a lone villain of the earth. There are lots of echoes of the gospel in this story that suggest that Shakespeare is correlating this moment in the history of the Roman Empire with the rise of Christianity. One of the strongest aspects of this is the appearance of the afterlife in this play. We have seen that the Republic works by, in effect, denying an afterlife, by keeping the Romans absolutely focused on this life and their achievements therein. And I pointed out to you that in Julius Caesar, Shakespeare had a reference to the afterlife staring him in North's Plutarch, and he deliberately rejected it. He corrected it. He didn't want to have Brutus speaking of life in a better world. Here, with, as I'll show you, the slightest hints of mention of the afterlife, both in North's Plutarch and in the Greek original, Shakespeare plays up the notion of an afterlife in the play. You see it introduced on page 119. This is Act 4, Scene 14, about line 50. And it's so great. Antony's shouting out Eros throughout all these scenes. It couldn't be more appropriate. Eros, stay for me. Eros, I come, my queen. Where souls do couch on flowers, we'll hand in hand, and with our sprightly port make the ghost gaze. Dido and her Aeneas shall want troops, and all the haunt be ours. Now, as many people have pointed out, Antony misreads the Aeneid here. Dido and Aeneas are not reunited in the afterlife. She's with her first husband, Sichaeus, and she takes one look at Aeneas, who dumped her, and she, stares him down. But there's a deeper reinterpretation of the underworld in classical terms going on here, in which, in effect, the underworld becomes the Elysian fields, it becomes heaven. That is, Antony is picturing the afterlife here more like a Christian heaven than like a classical underworld. The underworld is a pretty nasty place, chiefly a place of punishment in the Odyssey, in the Aeneid. There are occasionally a bright moment, but the defining notion of the underworld in the classical world is the moment when Achilles tells Odysseus in the Odyssey, I'd rather be a slave and still alive on earth than be the king down here among the shades. And indeed, it's another case where we tend to reinterpret classical things on Christian models when we look at descriptions of the underworld and reinterpret as heaven. And that's exactly what Antony is doing here. He's making it seem like an attractive place. And that does transform things here. Let me point out to you on page 173, if you've got the Signet edition, you can see the germ of this idea of an afterlife. This is about 8 lines up from the bottom on 173. O Cleopatra, it grieveth me not that I've lost my company, for I will not be long from thee. But I am sorry that, having been so great a company, a cabinet emperor, I am indeed condemned. So I will not be long from thee. That's as close to Antony mentioning an afterlife in Plutarch, though obviously it's very limited compared to his imaging this passage about Dido and Aeneas and these fields of glory here. Now, with Cleopatra, it's very interesting to look at her reaction to Antony's death, because it points up again, this kind of transformation. Look at page 126. This is Act 4, Scene 15, line 58 and 59. Antony's last words are, now my spirit is going, I can no more. Again, that has all sorts of echoes of the gospel in it. But anyway, notice Cleopatra's reaction. Noblest of men who die, hast thou no care of me? Shall I abide in this dull world, which in thy absence is no better than a sty? O see, my women, the crown of the earth doth melt. Again, that pervasive imagery of melting goes throughout the play. My lord, O withered is the garland of the war. The soldier's pole is fallen. Young boys and girls are level now with men. The odds is gone, and there is nothing left remarkable beneath the visiting moon. So this is the ancient world with its masters and servants, its hierarchy, and now Cleopatra has a visioning of the leveling of all hierarchy. With Antony's death, young boys and girls are level now with men. The odds is gone, and there's nothing left remarkable beneath the visiting moon. This is the end of aristocracy. The entering of a world, a Christian world, where all human beings are brothers. And she follows it out. Iris is saying, Royal Egypt Empress, and she says, line 72, no more but e'en a woman, and commanded by such poor passion as the maid that milks and does the meanest chairs. It were for me to throw my scepter at the injurious gods, to tell them that this world did equal theirs till they had stolen our jewel. All's but naught. Tremendous sense of leveling here. We've been seeing, in Coriolanus, the city distinctly ranges. We've seen Coriolanus try to divide human beings up into categories. You guys are geese, I'm a lion. All these aristocratic distinctions that characterize the ancient pagan world. Now Cleopatra sees them as leveled, and then the extraordinary words, still on page 126, line 79, then is it sin to rush into the secret house of death, ere death come to us. Suddenly, suicide has become a sin in the pagan world. Out of nowhere. We've seen that in Shakespeare's terms, it's almost the defining difference between the pagan and the Christian world. For Horatio, trying to say I'll commit suicide, says, I am more an antique Roman than a Dane, which is saying I'm a more pagan than a Christian when it comes to suicide. Hamlet, beginning from his awareness, the everlasting hath fixed his canon against self-slaughter. Macbeth, as you'll be seeing, saying, why should I play the Roman fool and die on mine own sword? This strong Christian awareness that suicide is a sin. But of course, we've been seeing in the ancients, suicide is virtually required of a noble Roman. At the end of Julius Caesar, the characters are lining up to commit suicide. You for me first, you first. You kill me and then I'll kill you. No, wait a minute. You kill. Anyway, suicide is the answer to the problem of Roman honor. You don't want to live on in slavery. You don't want to live on in shame, and so you kill yourself. But Cleopatra is thinking of killing herself now. On the very next page, she says she's going to do it. This is page 127. Do it after the high Roman fashion. She understands the Roman attitude to suicide, but she suddenly asks if it is a sin. And again, these are one of the signs that Shakespeare's pushing us to the brink of the Christian world here, where Christianity will become a sin. Why? Because the afterlife has suddenly become attractive. If the afterlife, such as it is, as portrayed by Homer and Virgil, who's going to want to commit suicide? Again, that defining moment when Achilles says, I'd rather be a slave and still be alive than down here. But if you start thinking that the afterlife is heaven, and then it's going to be better, and that lovers are going to be reunited, all that, then you may need a prohibition against it. And you can need to ask, why does Christianity so strongly prohibit sin? Suicide was a capital crime in most Western legal systems. If you tried to kill yourself, they'd execute you for it as a crime. There's a certain legal logic to that, because then the crown could claim your goods. But still, it's one of the great jokes in the Western legal system that suicide was a capital crime. But, you didn't want people committing suicide. And indeed, it's a very interesting sign of this transformation of the ancient world that Shakespeare is portraying, that we see here suicide become a sin. And indeed, so much turns at the end of this play on the weird new logic of this world where people have immortal longings and where they're seeking out, as we hear from the beginning of the play, new heaven, new earth. By the way, the phrase new heaven, new earth comes from the book of Revelations. I think it's chapter 25 where that appears. But look at the strange meeting between Cleopatra and the clown. This is on page 142 to 143. The clown's speech is full of paradoxes and, in a way, malapropisms. He's saying the wrong words. But what he does do is cast a real aura of ambiguity about everything that happens at the end of the play. This is on 142, so Act 5, Scene 2, line 245, when Cleopatra asks if he has the asp with him, truly I have him, but I would not be the party that should desire you to touch him, for his biting is immortal. Those that die of it do seldom or never recover. This is not what you want to be hearing on the day you're committing suicide in the hopes of an afterlife. She does hope for an afterlife. Look over on page 143. It's the same notion. So still Act 5, Scene 2, about line 287. Husband, I come. Now, if you'll turn to page 178, if you got the signet to the Plutarch there's a little hint there. It's just below the middle of the page on 178. She's addressing Antony after his death. If therefore the gods where thou art now have any power and authority. Again, gods where thou art now. The implication is he's in some kind of other world, kind of afterlife. And Shakespeare seizes upon that. Again, he does not completely pull this stuff out of thin air. But anyway, Cleopatra is hoping that, as she puts it, line 281, I have immortal longings. And again, we have not seen that in Coriolanus or any of the characters in Julius Caesar. They've longed for immortality in that sense of fame, but not the notion that they're longing for an afterlife. But here she is hoping for immortal longings. But the guy who shows up confuses immortal with mortal. For he says of the pretty worm, his biting is immortal. And as your notes point out, his blunder for mortal. But again, that's not what you want on the day you're hoping for your immortality, to have someone blundering that. And then thoroughly confusing it, those that do die of it do seldom or never recover. Which is it? It's never recover, maybe not so good. And then these lines, they keep blurring things and making it seem more and more confusing. Talking about in his next speech, I heard of, rememberest thou any that have died on it? Very many men and women too. I heard of one of them, no longer in the essay, a very honest woman, but something given to lie. Again, the confusion between honesty and lying at a moment you're trying to get the truth about death here, as a woman should not do, but in the way of honesty. How she died of the biting of it, what pain she felt. Truly she makes a very good report of the worm, but he that will believe all that they say shall never be saved by half that they do. But this is most fallible, the worm's an odd worm. These are all internally contradictory phrases. Especially it suggests we really can't know what happens to people after death because we never get a report of it. Think of Hamlet's characterization of the afterlife, the undiscovered bourne from which no traveler returns. And then he tells her that the worm is not to be trusted, but in the keeping of wise people, for indeed there is no goodness in the worm. So it's a very strange exchange. It might remind you of the discussion of the crocodile earlier in the play. The crocodile, the worm, we cannot get the truth about them. People tend to talk around them and about them. And so it does cast a kind of skeptical aura over this last speech of Cleopatra. As beautiful as it is, look at it. This is now again on 143. This again is a speech that points in the direction of Christianity here. Line 280. Give me my robe, put on my crown, I have immortal longings in me. Now no more the juice of Egypt's grace shall moist this lip. There's a strong element of asceticism in this, not aestheticism, but asceticism. She's renouncing the flesh. She who was the queen of the flesh in the play is now renouncing it. Methinks I hear Antony call, I see him rouse himself to praise my noble act. I hear him mock the luck of Caesar, which the gods give men to excuse their after wrath. Husband, I come, now to that name my courage prove my title. I am fire and air, my other elements I give to baser life. So here she's spiritualizing it all. She's rising above the body. I'm fire and air, my other elements I give to baser lives. And then top of 144, the stroke of death is as a lover's pinch, which hurts and is desired, and so on. So she looks to death as a form of redemption here. And actually, Caesar's pretty nice about it. If you look at it, last page, 147, Antony and Cleopatra are dead, and what does he offer them? End of Act 5, Scene 2, about line 358. No grave upon the earth shall clip in it a pair so famous. This is actually what Antony desired. If you turn back to page 5, one of the first passages we looked at in the play, so Act 1, Scene 1, what was his hope? Line 35, the nobleness of life is to do thus, when such a mutual pair, notice the echo here, no grave shall clip in it a pair so famous, and here, such a mutual pair and such a twain can do it, on which I bind on pain of punishment, the world to weed, we stand up peerless. And that's what Octavius offers to them at the end. No grave upon the earth shall clip in it a pair so famous. They have become the great mythic lovers. Now it is in Octavius' interest as emperor to encourage this myth of love, because this has been the whole fat, lean strategy all along for the imperial party. Get people to indulge in eros, and it will make them less eager to contest for the throne. So Octavius would love to start an Antony and Cleopatra cult. Let everybody follow the course of Antony and Cleopatra into love and leave him alone politically. So we see, again, this transformation of Rome now, whole concepts that were not there in the Republic, the notion of immortality, the notion of suicide as a sin, and they all roughly correspond to the transformation that was going to occur a few decades later, at least as Christianity was introduced into the world. Now, to come back to that question about how Shakespeare fits in vis-a-vis Machiavelli and Nietzsche here, I'm trying to show you that this is a way in which the history of Rome is very fundamental to philosophers and to the history of political philosophy. That you see Machiavelli and Nietzsche, now I'm saying Shakespeare, among these very deep thinkers about human nature. One thing they really think about is Rome, and one reason they do it is they're trying to understand an aristocratic pagan society, and one reason they're doing that is they know that what follows it is Christianity. And they want to understand Christianity better by understanding what preceded it and what it transformed. I've tried to show you there's a lot of similarities here in the analysis. But let me show you where I think Shakespeare stands on it vis-a-vis Nietzsche. There are basically two ways of understanding the relationship of Christianity to Rome, and Nietzsche, being generous as a thinker, adopts both of them. And so I can illustrate the two ways both from Nietzsche. In Nietzsche's public position, in his published writings, he saw the Roman Empire as an unshakable institution which was subverted from within by Christianity. I'm quoting here from some of his published works, namely from the last book he wrote before he went insane, called The Antichrist, catchy title. And there he states quite unequivocally, it is not, as is supposed, the corruption of antiquity itself, of noble antiquity, that made Christianity possible. I'm going to argue that Shakespeare adopts the opposite position, that he does trace the rise of Christianity to the corruption of antiquity. Nietzsche, at this moment of his life, says that the Roman Empire could have survived intact if it had not been for the appearance of Christianity. He writes, then again, still in the Antichrist, that which stood there forever, the Roman Empire, the most magnificent form of organization under difficult circumstances which has yet been achieved, these holy anarchists, the Christians, made it a matter of piety for them to destroy that world that is the Roman Empire, until not one stone remained on the other, until even Germans and other louts could become masters over it. And he goes on to write, the Roman Empire, this most admirable work of art in the grand style, was a beginning. See, I want you to, Shakespeare takes a very strong stand, I think, as presenting as an ending. But I want you to see there is another view of it, and here it is in Nietzsche. Its most admirable work of art was a beginning. Its construction was designed to prove itself through thousands of years. Until today, nobody has built again like this. And it is amazing that Roman roads and aqueducts and bridges are still in use all around Europe. Nobody has built again like this. Nobody has even dreamed of building in such proportions under the aspect of eternity. This organization, the Roman Empire, was firm enough to withstand bad emperors. And again, there's an amazing truth to that. This Roman Empire lasted roughly 450 years with creatures like Nero and Caligula ruling it. The accident of persons may not have anything to do with such matters, first principle of all grand architecture. But it was not firm enough against the most corrupt kind of corruption, against the Christians. Again, Nietzsche did not like Christianity. And he surveys the subversion of Rome and laments the whole labor of the ancient world in vain. That, I say, is Nietzsche's published position. As some of you may know, a lot of Nietzsche's work survived in the form of manuscripts of notes he kept. And after he went insane, his sister took some of them and published them in a book which she called The Will to Power, which really has no authenticity in the sense that it's nothing that Nietzsche himself supervised in publication. Nevertheless, there's a lot of interesting stuff in those notes. And here's one which presents the exact opposite view of the fall of the Roman Empire. The degeneration of the rulers and the ruling classes has been the cause of the greatest mischief in history. Without the Roman Caesars and Roman society, the insanity of Christianity would never have come to power again. Nietzsche, could you please tell us what you really think of Christianity? It really goes over the top here. When lesser men begin to doubt whether higher men exist, then the danger is great. And one ends by discovering that there is virtue also among the lowly and subjugated, the poor in spirit, and that before God men are equal. This is all just the logic we've seen worked out with Cleopatra. For ultimately the higher men measured themselves according to the standard of virtue of slaves, found they were proud, found all their higher qualities reprehensible. When Nero and Caracalla sat up there, the paradox arose, the lowest man is worth more than that man up there. It's paltry to be Caesar. And the way was prepared for an image of God that was as remote as possible from the image of the most powerful, the God on the cross. And never forget that crucifixion was associated with criminality in the ancient world, and that which has become the great image of Jesus was an effort of the Romans to denigrate him originally. So you see there the two views that Nietzsche himself articulates. One, that it was only Christians who brought down this otherwise stable construction of the Roman Empire, which otherwise would have lasted forever. And then this view, no. It was the internal corruption of Rome that made it possible for Christianity. I think Shakespeare takes that second view. And that's, I mean, in a way, Antony and Cleopatra gives us Christianity without the Christians. It shows us if you will, the principles of Christianity developing within the Roman and Egyptian aristocracy. That's what's so interesting about it, and what in effect makes the subversion all the clearer. Nietzsche's theory of master and slave morality really is quite brilliant, I think, and really helps to understand the difference between the pagan world and the Christian, and we're going to see this come up, particularly in Hamlet and Macbeth. But one thing that always struck me as weak about it was the mechanism of the revaluation. He's always talking about the masters as strong and the slaves as weak. How did the weak ever turn the tables on the strong if they weren't strong enough to lift a couple of tables? Now, if you read Genealogy of Morals carefully, you'll see that, in fact, Nietzsche attributes the process to renegade priests. In effect, there had to be some division within the ranks of the masters to bring about this transformation. And he does talk about the role of priests who would have been part of the aristocratic order in the ancient world. We're not talking about Christian priests here, but priests in the old pagan order. He does talk about the role, and I would say more generally, I think he was, in these notes, working towards, I think, a more Shakespearean theory of what happened. That it's one thing for an itinerant preacher to come along and say 'tis paltry to be Caesar, or to say servants and masters are equal. It's incredibly more powerful when Queen Cleopatra says that. You can say she really knows what majesty is. She points that out. In a way, she's able to measure the degeneracy of the aristocracy better than ordinary people can. Because she says, she knows what majesty is. And she looks at Caesar and she says, you're no Mark Antony. And so, as we've been seeing on many levels, this play is about the draining of nobility from the ancient world. And that prepares the way for a new ideology of the subject people, of the slaves. In a way, the empire turns everyone into slaves. I've been saying that from the beginning. It turns active citizens into passive subjects. And they are no better than slaves in that sense. In a way, that's Cleopatra's claim about Caesar. Caesar himself is no better than a slave, because nobody rules anymore. This machine has been created, we've seen. And, a child could be running Rome. A coward could be running the armies. The armies are running on automatic. There's this sense now, no heroes are left. And so it's a world of tremendously diminished stature and a world which has reshaped a morality for that. So Shakespeare, I think, again, sees that something had happened to the ancient world. Part of it is that simple expansion. And again, we now have this universal community. The polis has dissolved. We're now in a world that tries to embrace the whole world. It needs a religion to embrace the whole world, and that's going to be a religion of the little of the earth. Again, that's why I hate that emendation so much. Shakespeare gave us the clue there that he would be the god of Antony would be the god of the little of the earth, the man of sorrows, the man who aroused pity in his followers, who came down to their level. In a way, we see that already in his behavior in Julius Caesar. So in that sense, it's a remarkable effort to analyze the moral change that Christianity was to bring about in the world. And Shakespeare will follow out the consequences of that in the plays we're looking at now. So let me pose any questions, and this time I really mean it. And again, I hope to talk to you in private afterwards about hubris. But okay, let me lead us into next week then. What we see in this play is the transformation of the ancient world, and we can see the poses it's going to problems it's going to pose for the modern world. I've been using Nietzsche, and that presents Christianity in very negative terms. But think about it. This is a world in which a new heaven and a new earth has opened up. And we see a lot of possibilities close down in this play, but a lot of possibilities open up. And life is going to get more complex, especially internal life. People are now concerned about the afterlife and all sorts of new concerns. And we see here already hints of how Christianity is going to complicate politics. It's what we're going to look at from the first scene in Henry V. The political life of the Roman Republic was, in a certain sense, very simple. The cities set the rules, and the rules were clear. It is held that valor is the chiefest virtue. You focus your citizens' lives on the city, on political life. And I've been stressing that. It's why I think Shakespeare is interested in the Republic. But don't think that because Shakespeare thought politics was important, he thought it was everything. He does show that politics is a central human activity. It is, in a way, the ordering human activity. And we've seen how much the political regime affects the character of individual human beings. And yet in the Republic, it does that by excluding so much from their lives, as subordinating religion, subordinating love, subordinating the family to the city. That produces a kind of political man, but it also shows the limits of politics. Shakespeare is very aware that there are things in life that go beyond politics. He was not himself a politician. He was a playwright, and as I've been arguing, a great thinker. And he knew there were dimensions that go beyond political life. In a way, the central tragic fact for Shakespeare is the tension between politics and non-politics. Politics is a realm of fulfillment. Many human beings fulfill themselves in politics. It is the outlet for thumos, which is a real part of human nature for Shakespeare. But it isn't all of human nature, and there are things that cannot be fulfilled in politics. We see that, Antony's whole sense is there's something beyond politics. Even Coriolanus said there's a world elsewhere. He just didn't understand it couldn't be just another city. Antony really does pursue a world elsewhere, a new heaven, new earth. So Shakespeare has the sense that politics is a vital, central, important human activity. It's a necessity. You need it to protect you. It's a world of armies, clashing armies, world of war. You need politics, you need soldiers, you need armies. And yet it isn't everything. There's something that goes beyond it. In a way, we talked about this in connection with Aristotle. The crazy claim of the polis is that it is everything. That it can mean everything to its citizens. It can be the focus of their family life, the focus of their religion, that the polis is a self-sufficient community. But what we see in Antony and Cleopatra is once the polis goes beyond a certain limit, it starts to dissolve, it loses control, and a lot of bad things happen politically, and certain human possibilities seem to drop out. On the other hand, some open up. And that's where we're going to see how you start to see in Antony and Cleopatra some kind of transcendent dimension to human life that isn't comprised and bounded by the polis anymore. And I think Shakespeare has in mind Christianity as one of those possibilities. Another one of those possibilities surfaces when Antony asks to live a private man in Athens. I mean, what we see in this last play of the Roman trilogy is that people are starting to say, the city isn't everything to me anymore. Politics isn't everything to me. There are other things in life. One of them might be living a private life in Athens, a city associated with philosophy, with the study of politics, not of politics itself. So as we turn to Henry V, we'll see how much more complicated a regime is when it tries to be a regime, but still has in it this force, Christianity, which is not bounded by the regime, which has loyalties elsewhere. Very specific terms in England, that meant loyalties to the papacy under Catholicism, loyalties to, in effect, a foreign state. So the Roman plays as a whole, and Antony and Cleopatra in particular, take us to the brink of the modern Christian world and actually lay out what it's going to involve, and then Shakespeare will go on to explore it from there. So that's where we go next Tuesday.